This meeting is being recorded.
And take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sal, for the introduction, and thanks to all of you for coming to my talk. I'm going to start with a short introduction to Australia, and then I'll show you some of the bird diversity in Australia. My first point here is let's just admit that Australia is big. This map shows it superimposed over North America, and in fact, it's basically 95% of the geographic area of our lower 48 states. It's actually the sixth largest country in the world by geographic area. It does have many habitats. I know we tend to think of it as a very arid area with just some water around the coastline. Well, admittedly, 70% is arid or semi-arid deserts and grasslands. In this map, you can see the red area is desert. The light yellow around that is grassland. But then there are some other habitats there, from tropical in the north to temperate in the south. The actual geographic range, if you go to the very far north where it's tropical, that very tip is around 10 degrees south latitude. So that's well within the tropical zone. And then if you go to the south part, the most south part at the tip of Tasmania, that's actually 43 degrees south latitude. The Tropic of Capricorn, which actually defines the limit of the tropical zone, goes across a little bit above half. A little bit more than a third of the country is technically tropical. So that does include some of that desert and northern territory, desert and grassland, as well as the green part there. Australia has a long history of isolation. It was part of Gondwana, which started fracturing about 100 million years ago. MYA is for million years ago. And Australia's last connection was via Antarctica, and that was last severed about 45 million years ago. Since then, Australia has not had land connection to another continent. It basically drifted north, it colliding with the Pacific plate, which is an oceanic plate, and approaching the Eurasian plate, basically Southeast Asia at an area we call the Sunda Shelf, but it's not connected there. They do predict it will be someday, many millions of years in the future. An important thing to note is that Australia and New Guinea are on the same continental plate. So during times of the Pleistocene, when a lot of water was locked up in glaciers, there were actual land connections between these two. And in fact, there's a lot of affinities between North Australia's tropical zone and then New Guinea above it. This is a map showing where Australia is now and some of the surrounding areas. Looking up in the upper left here, this is the edge of the Asian continent here. But you can see all this light blue, this is continental shelf, and they actually call it the Sunda Shelf. On this, you see the islands of Sumatra, Java, Bali, and Borneo. Also during those Pleistocene times when the water went down, all of these were connected by land to the rest of Asia. And they have a lot of floral and faunal affinities with Asia. This red line, Wallace's line, that was described by Alfred Russel Wallace, the famous biogeographer. He worked in this area for many years, and he noticed a lot of faunal differences between Borneo and this island across the line called Celebes, currently called Sulawesi. And he described this difference here and called it Wallace's line. It effectively describes the edge of that Sunda Shelf, or basically the Asian continent. Now, if you go a little further in here, you can see that Sulawesi, Lombok, these lesser Sunda islands, Timor, Suram, the Halmaheras, all of these, it's a darker blue. Well, these are separated by deep water, and they've never been connected to either of these continents. So things that go out there to those islands, it's actually a difficult dispersal. They have to fly or swim or drift out to them. And they actually have very unique fauna, each one of them. And now we come further, and you can see Weber's line kind of is on the edge of this plate. Oh, let me go back. This area that's in the deeper blue that is all those islands, we collectively call that Wallacea, just to give it a name to indicate that area. And then over here, we have Australia and New Guinea. Again, we see the light blue, which is their continental shelf. It's also called the Sahul Shelf. And so again, they were connected during the low water times. And there are definitely biological affinities between especially southern New Guinea and this northern part of Australia. Well, Australia has a lot of birds. It has 892 species listed, and this is just for the continent, including Tasmania. An astounding 45% of those bird species are endemic. And now when I use the word endemic, I don't just mean native, I mean it only occurs in the certain area that is defined. Whether I say it's endemic to Australia or maybe Australia and New Guinea, that means you have to go there. They're not found anywhere else. Even more surprising, there's 7 avian families that are totally endemic to Australia, and another 10 that are totally endemic to Australia and New Guinea. Now, this talk is going to be based off birds that I've seen, so I'm going to show you where I've traveled. Back in January of 2001, I went to South Australia. I had some meetings in Adelaide. I coded this in purple, so where you see the little purple birds. After my meetings, I rented a car and I went to several areas around there, a little bit into the desert, some on the coast and out to Kangaroo Island. And I just saw what I could see on my own. Didn't make it back for a long time, but finally in September of 2024, I went on a birding tour, which went to Victoria and Tasmania. Here I've coded them with green birds. We spent quite a lot of time in Victoria and many habitats, and then went down to the south part of Tasmania to see some of the Tasmanian endemics. And then my last trip was in September of 2025. I'm coding this one in red. We went to again, this was a birding tour. We went to Western Australia and the Northern Territory. First, we went to Perth area, and in the south part of Perth, we had several days looking at birds in different areas. Then we flew to Alice Springs, which is in the middle of the continent, had a couple of days there in the desert looking for desert birds. And then we went up to the north and looked for birds at Darwin and Kununurra for a variety of tropical birds. Now, I'll tell you, I'm basing this off of birds that I've seen and also photographed. So all the photographs that follow are mine. I have seen 430 species there. Of those, I've been able to photograph 226. However, that's way too many birds. So I had to decide what was important to show, and of course I picked mostly endemic species, and especially if there were endemic groups. But it's not totally that. I did put in some others that I think it's just important groups for that area. But there will be some groups that are missing. It's not that they're not there. It's just that I had to pick and choose. For instance, I will tell you, you're not going to see any sandpipers or plovers, but they are there. I decided I'd rather spend the time on emus and cockatoos and honey eaters, things like that. So to go to our birds, the first one we'll look at is the emu. And I hope you like taxonomy, because you'll see at the top, I'm going to write in what order and family it's in. They are in the Cassowaria the family Cassowareidae. The emu is totally endemic to Australia. It's in a wide part of the arid part, mostly in grasslands, but you can see here grasslands with bushes. They're very omnivorous. It's a tall bird, second tallest bird, living bird. They get up to 6 feet tall. And kind of an interesting thing about them is that the males are actually the ones that incubate and raise the young. Now, I'll add one other note here. You might be looking at the order and family names and thinking, oh, I've got to tell you, the order and family are in both Australia and New Guinea. And that's because the other species in this group is the cassowary. I haven't seen any, so I can't show you a picture. But the cassowary does occur in Australia and New Guinea. The next order we'll look at is the Anseriformes. This is a waterfowl, which is a very wide-ranging group throughout the world, many, many species. But most of them are in the family Anatidae, including all the ones we see here in North America. However, this family, Anserenatidae, only has one species, the magpie goose, and this is endemic to Australia and New Guinea. Um, right now, it's just in northern Australia and New Guinea. I believe they are trying to reintroduce it to some more southern parts of Australia. They do like wet areas, as you see in the picture, and they're mainly vegetarian. And this is basically kind of a very big goose and kind of tall too. Now I am going to show you some that are in the common family, Anatidae. First off, the black swan. It is naturally just in Australia and New Guinea. There are some introduced to New Zealand, and I know some places they've brought some into as ornamentals. They can be in fresh water or salty water, mainly vegetarian. I put in the flight picture because I wanted to show you that they have white flight feathers, which I think is very kind of strange because melanin actually makes feathers stronger, and flight feathers go through a lot of stress. It's a very pretty pattern, but I think it's very unusual that their flight feathers are white. Now, some other anatids, they do have some whistling ducks there. I've only put one in, and this is the one that is endemic to Australia. It spends most of its time in the water, but it mainly grazes. It's a vegetarian. The main duck used to be called Australian wood duck. The male's at the top, and that's a female with some young at the bottom. These are cavity nesters, and they're basically dabbling ducks, but actually they prefer to graze. So you see the female with her young grazing in the grass. A couple other unusual anatids, and these are both endemic to Australia and Tasmania. Or no, the first one, freckled duck, is Australia and Tasmania. No, just Australia. The freckled duck, it is a dabbler, and it's very vegetarian. The musk duck is a diving duck, and actually it dives to eat animal life. So basically insects, mollusks, whatever it can catch. This is the male shown here with that big dewlap. And then the pink-eared duck. I think this is the most striking looking one. Again, this one's endemic to Australia. It prefers salty water, so either brackish or salty water. And that big bill might make you think of the shoveler, and it feeds basically like the shoveler, filters out plankton with that. Next, we're to the order Galliformes. I'm only going to show one family in Galliformes, and that's the Megapodidae. And if you're thinking Bigfoot, yes, that's right. That's exactly what that means. This is not a family that's endemic to Australia. It actually extends from the Philippines through Indonesia to Australia. And this particular species, there's only 3 species that make it actually to Australia. This is one of them. It's in the north, and it's actually pretty easy to see. It's got a perfect name because he does have big orange feet. But the big feet are not what's most interesting about this group. What's most interesting, I think, is that they're super precocial. This is a mound of a malleefowl, which is a megapode that's only in Australia. It's in the interior and drier areas. The male was around, but he left for the photograph, so we just get the mound. This mound is about 4 feet high and about 12 feet across. We saw some others in another place that weren't being used that were smaller, and I've heard or read about others that are bigger. Now, what super precocial is about, most of our birds we would classify as either altricial or precocial. Altricial are the ones that have helpless young that hatch out. And those young basically have very little covering, their eyes are closed, and about the only thing they can do is beg for food. Well, precocial, and that's examples are our songbirds, all of the songbirds. Precocial young, well, when they hatch out, they have a good down covering, their eyes are open, and a lot of times they start running around. And so think of a baby chicken. Well, with the megapodes, they take this a step further. They are super precocial. Basically, the female will lay her egg in an area that will incubate the egg. She does not personally incubate it, neither does the male. And so some megapodes will put their eggs in some a geothermally active area that has warm soil. Some will put it in an area where there's volcanic sand that gets sunlight and that keeps it warm. But most of them make a mound. And in fact, a common name for this group is mound builders because so many do make mounds. So this is the malleefowl mound. And within this mound, there is going to be an area with vegetation, basically decaying vegetation. So the mound not only insulates the eggs, but that decaying vegetation lets off heat, and that's what keeps them warm. So in this case, the female will, when she has an egg ready, oh, and these eggs are big. They're at least twice as big as an equivalent sized bird, another bird would have. And they have a lot of yolk in them. So this female lays the egg deep in this mound down by the decaying vegetation, and then she goes off. It will take her several days till she's ready to lay another egg in the mound. In the case of the malleefowl, it's the male who takes care of the mound. Some other species, both of them do help take care of it. But basically, this male is going to stay around enough to see that the mound is the right temperature. If it's too cold, he'll put more on. If it's too hot, he'll open it up some so it can cool off. Okay, and that's it for what the parents do. As far as the young, they take 2 months or it could be 3 or 4 months, depends on the species, for it to finish developing. And when the young has to hatch out, it basically breaks the egg with its big feet. And then remember, it's inside a mound. Next, it has to dig out of the mound with its big feet. The parents are done. They're not going to help with any of this. So it digs out with its big feet, comes out, and it's totally going to live on its own. It can feed itself. That's it. Anyway, that's super precocial. All right, going on to another order, the Columbiformes columbidae. These are the doves and pigeons. There's quite a few throughout Australia. These are all endemic species. The peaceful dove, bar-shouldered dove, and the diamond dove. I will say the diamond dove does tend to be in more arid areas. All of these are basically granivores. And then this next one I wanted to show you, it's endemic to Australia. But it's over a wide range. I just think it's a very pretty dove. It's called the bronzewing, and you can see the iridescence in its coverts. It extends over a wide area, and again, it's a little bigger than the others, and it's mainly a granivore again. And then these two with these really impressive crests, one called a crested pigeon and the other a spinifex pigeon. They're just a little bigger than, say, our mourning dove, and they tend to be in arid areas, especially the spinifex one. In fact, they actually named it after spinifex, which is a very pokey grass in the desert. Okay. Again, these are both granivores. And the last two I want to show you, these are not endemic to Australia. And in fact, they extend over to New Guinea and also some of the islands outside of there. So some of Wallacea and probably a few on the other side of New Guinea. These are big. The fruit dove is a big dove, and the imperial pigeon is even bigger. Both of these are fruit eaters. And part of the reason I wanted to show them is that they're kind of indicative of what you see if you go to a lot of those islands in that area of the world. The fruit doves and the imperial pigeons are big fruit eaters, they're very strong flyers, and they have several relatives that'll be in those islands around there. So these are some Australian representatives of those. Okay, the next order and family is the Podargiformes podargidae. The example we saw was a tawny frogmouth. Now, this order and family actually extend from South Asia all the way to Australia. They do live in forests, as you can see. In fact, that one is on a nest. The other's just roosting. They look a lot like caprimulgids, but there's a couple of differences. One is that they're substantially larger. The other thing is they're not quite as aerial, These guys mainly stay in the trees. They aren't foraging up on the wing like a nighthawk would. They'll stay in the tree roosting, and in the evening they're watching. And if they see a yummy insect on the ground, then they'll pounce, and that's how they'll get their dinner. The next order is Gruiformes, and the first family we're just going to have these two examples. And the Rallidae is where you have rails and also coots and moorhens. They do have all those things, but they look similar to ours. I just wanted to show these native hens because they look much different. These are kind of the size of very, very large chickens and very plump. The black-tailed native hen is only found on Australia, and there you can see it's in wet habitats and very omnivorous, whatever it can get. The Tasmanian native hen is only on Tasmania, and this picture shows it in a dry area, which is accurate again. They tend to just be in grassland, and they're basically pretty vegetarian, eating leaves and seeds and grain and such. Now, I do have to put in one crane. There is a crane that is endemic to Australia and New Guinea, and it's this brolga. So if you want to see a brolga, you got to go to Australia or New Guinea. Oh, it lives mainly in freshwater wetlands, and it's very omnivorous. Apparently, they like sedge tubers a lot. Okay. Now, with the Charadriiformes, of course, there's a lot of Charadriiformes there, but I'm only going to show two families. This first one, Pedionomidae, it only has one species, and this species, the plains wanderer, is only found in Australia. Well, you can see the picture of it here. It's say about dove size. It does live in just a sparse, low grassland. It eats grass seeds and insects, and they're very difficult to find. They're only found in a few spots in eastern Australia. And for us to find them, basically our guide hired a local guide who apparently is the one that everybody hires if they want to see this. He has some land and he knows how to find them. So he had us out there in the evening in the dark with all our flashlights, and him and a buddy had night vision goggles. And eventually we found a couple of these. So a very, very endemic species there. Now this other family, Turnicidae, this one is not endemic. And in fact, the family is not endemic. It occurs in Africa, Asia, and of course, Australia. The common name for the family is button quail. There's only 18 worldwide. 6 occur in Australia. Now, this painted button quail is endemic to Australia and Tasmania. And where we saw this was in an open forest. I think we disturbed him because he was running back and forth. Anyway, you can see it is in the shorebird order, the Charadriiformes, but it does look very much like a quail, and it's very, very terrestrial. Okay, he eats seeds, shoots, invertebrates, whatever he can find on the ground there. All right, now we're to the Characiformes. Now that we're most familiar with because kingfishers are in here. But the first family I want to show is the Meropidae. The family is not endemic. It's actually pretty widespread. There's some in Europe, Africa, Asia to Australia. But there is one species that does make it to Australia. Again, not endemic because it is in Australia, New Guinea, and also Wallacea. But I want to show it because it's a pretty bird, and also it's kind of interesting. Its feeding habits, from the name you can guess that it eats insects, including bees and wasps. When it catches one, it does need to process it for a while. And so, especially if it has a stinger, it has to squeeze out the stinger or gets it out by beating it against a branch. So they're interesting to watch when they catch something. Now to go to the kingfishers, the Alcidinidae, I've got to show you the laughing kookaburra. These live in East Australia in woods, mainly eat invertebrates. And in fact, most kingfishers are more woods species. And so the laughing kookaburra definitely is a big kingfisher. There's also another kookaburra called the blue-winged one. We saw it in the north part of the country. Again, this is in open areas and eats mostly invertebrates. These other kingfishers, the sacred kingfisher actually is pretty widespread. It's all the way over to Indonesia, and I think it actually makes it to New Zealand too. Um, it's in a lot of habitats and mostly eats invertebrates. With the azure kingfisher, it again is Australia, New Guinea. It also makes it into Wallacea. This one actually acts more like what we expect to kingfishers to do. It's near water and it'll eat fish and aquatic invertebrates or aquatic insects that it'll find. Couple more. The forest kingfisher we saw in northern Australia, and it does extend out to Wallacea and such, so it's widespread. But again, it's mostly a forest bird, just as the name indicates. And the redback kingfisher, this is one that's actually kind of widespread in Australia. It looks like he actually has some kind of lizard there. Anyway, he's in semi-arid areas and eats insects and sometimes a vertebrate. Like I said, it looks like he has a lizard. Now going to the psittaciformes, and here we're going to have cockatoos and also parrots. With the psittaciformes, the habits of these are fairly similar. They have those big heavy bills that they eat fruits, nuts, and seeds with. Fairly sizable birds, some bigger than others, and they do cavity nest. They're monogamous and cavity nest. And there are, the way they get the cavities, Australia has a lot of trees that actually drop branches, especially a lot of the eucalyptus. And when they drop the branches, what will happen is basically that area will rot out, maybe helped by fungi, or it could be helped by termites. There's no woodpeckers to help out, but there are still a lot of cavities from these dropped branches. So here you can see one of these cockatoos in its nesting hole. Now with the cockatoos, family Cockatoidae, the way they differ from the parrots is most of them are going to be colored either white or black, and then they have a crest. So here we have our sulfur crested cockatoo that we do see a lot in the pet market. And here's some smaller cockatoos. These are called corellas. There's a long-billed, a western, and a little. They're all similar looking, but they do differ some in their bill shape and how they have the red and blue pattern on their face. And then there are a couple that are actually pink colored. The pink cockatoo, if you have an older book or if you've been to Australia in the past, you might be wondering about Major Mitchell. Well, his name got taken off of this cockatoo, so it's now called the pink cockatoo. And it does tend to be in more arid areas. If you've been to Australia, you've seen a galah. If you do go in the future, you will see a galah. They seem to be everywhere, including in town. Just a very, very numerous species. Very pretty too. And then there are several black cockatoos. There's a yellow-tailed black cockatoo, a red-tailed black cockatoo, Carnaby's black cockatoo. Now I'll have to point out this one is actually endangered, and it has a very close relative in the same area called Bowden's black cockatoo, which is critically endangered. And then the gang cockatoo. This one is actually listed as vulnerable. Now to the parrots. There are a couple of parrot families, but the one that extends to Australia is this one, the Psittaculidae. Psittaculidae is in Africa, Asia, Indonesia, New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand. And basically these guys are colorful. The green rosella, this actually is an endemic species to Tasmania only. The eastern rosella, we saw this in the southeast and also in Tasmania, very, very colorful. Red-rumped, again a southeastern species. The Australian ringneck, this is more in the west and the interior, but another beautiful species, all of these are. The Australian king parrot, here's a male and a female. The male is more red-colored. And then the lorikeets, I guess they had to be the most colorful. The rainbow lorikeet is common in the east. It has been introduced into a couple of other towns. The red-colored collared lorikeet is up in North Australia. And then the swift parrot, well, I think all the parrots fly very fast, but the swift parrot is extra fast. We did see it a couple times just flying by, and here I just got really fortunate that it decided to settle in a tree just long enough to get a photograph. Something about these swift parrots, they do occur in Southeast Australia and in Tasmania, but they only breed in Tasmania. So they come to Southeast Australia outside the breeding time, and they are critically endangered. The next one is the superb parrot, again a Southeast Asian Australian species. And now we're to the Passeriformes. I have a few notes on those first. With recent advances in phylogenetic studies, they have determined in the last couple decades that the original ancestor of all the Passeriformes did develop in Australia. Now, this obviously had to happen before Australia was disconnected from Gondwanaland. And apparently early on, the non-songbird branch, the subobscenes, did get off Australia, but several of the early branches of the songbirds were in Australia. And in fact, some Australians are very proud to say that song originated in Australia. A couple other notes about the Passeriformes. There's a surprising number of species that eat mostly sugar. And by sugar, I actually mean nectar. They do think that's related to the environment, the eucalyptus and such, making a lot of sugar exudates. And these sugar eaters, I think they're pretty large. With this, I'm comparing them to what we have. Our nectar eaters are mainly hummingbirds, and those are tiny. Whereas the things I'm going to show you, the honey eaters, mainly, they're large. I'd say most of them are bigger than a mockingbird. And another thing, as we go through the Passeriformes, there's actually several examples of cooperative breeding. Cooperative breeding is defined as that there's more than just the parents helping to raise the young. So our first bird in minority are the lyrebirds. There's only 2 species, and they're endemic to Australia. They tend to be in wet forests in the east. Fortunately, we had been in a bunch of rain, but it stopped just long enough. This bird came out and we got to see him. Now you can see his tail is rather ornate, and that's where they get the name lyre. That ornate tail is part of his display, and so they're very polygynous. Male displays for the female. After copulation, she's on her own as far as raising the young. There's also bowerbirds in Australia. Now, this family, I'm sure you know, it's also in New Guinea. So they're in New Guinea and Australia. Mostly they tend to be in tropical rainforests, but in Australia, some of them are more in edge forests. And certainly the 2 I'm going to show you would be considered in edge habitat because they were both in city parks. This one, the western bowerbird, we saw in a city park in Alice Springs. And his bower there, you can see, it's what you call a avenue bower. He also, besides making the bower, he decorates the outside. And this one liked white things. It looks like he has bottle caps and bones. And that one thing looks like it might be a Christmas decoration. I'm not sure. And the whole point of this is for him to attract a female. Again, they're highly polygynous. After mating, his job is done. She goes off and has the eggs, raises the young all by herself. The other one is the great bowerbird, and we saw this in northern Australia in a Darwin city park. They're, again, the same idea. He has an avenue bower, and he decorated the front of it, again, with white things. It doesn't show very well, but actually this one, it was almost all bottle caps. I think their selection for decorations had a lot to do with living in the city. This group, the Climacteridae, is only in Australia and New Guinea, called Australasian tree creepers. There's only 7 species total, most of which are in Australia. They live in the forest and cavity nest. Some of them are actually known to cooperatively breed too. But when you see this, just go ahead and think about the habits of our brown creeper. Basically, it goes up the trunk looking for insects. When it gets to the top, it flies down to another trunk, goes up it too. So very similar habits. But one thing I think is quite interesting about this one, if you look at the right-hand side picture, you can see his tail, and it looks very ordinary. Our creeper has a very stiffened tail, as do all the woodpeckers. It helps them to brace against the tree trunk. This guy doesn't have it, so his crawling up the side of the tree is all done with very strong feet and claws. The Meluridae are commonly called the fairy wrens. This is definitely one of my favorite groups. They are only in Australia and New Guinea. These are the males. The females will be a duller color. These males here, you can see very iridescent, very bright colors. They're very insectivorous, and this group has a lot of examples of cooperative breeding. So I'm just going to go through some pictures. These are all males. Superb fairy wren, splendid fairy wren, purple-backed fairy wren, purple-crowned fairy wren, and a red-backed fairy wren. There are other species in this group, or other not called fairy wren in the group. The striated grass wren you can see is dull colors, but again, it's very insectivorous, and this one happens to be in drier habitats. Now, the family Melophagidae literally translates as honey eater. These do mainly eat nectar and pollen. They're very important pollinators in Australia. There's 76 species total. I've got to admit the family actually extends out to the Philippines and also Indonesia. So the family is not endemic, but there are a lot of endemic species of honey eaters. If you go anywhere in Australia, you're likely to have at least half a dozen honey eaters in that area. Okay. So to go through some of these species, this is the singing honey eater, black-headed honey eater. That one happens to be endemic to Tasmania. Lewin's honey eater, white-eared, white-naped, and white-plumed. Spiny-cheeked, New Holland, white-cheeked. Strong-billed, crescent, striped. Yellow-throated, yellow-plumed, yellow-tinted. Rufous-throated, and barb-breasted. That's just a sample. There are others in this group that are not called honey eaters, but actually their diet is very similar. They have the wattlebirds. You can see the red wattlebird with his wattles on there, and the little wattlebird. There's also a noisy miner. This is a noisy and gregarious species. They tend to be in groups and very territorial. They still eat similarly to the honey eaters. And then there's the friarbirds. The friarbirds still have similar habits, but they've now been named after that bald area on their head, reminding people of the friars of old. So the noisy, the silver-crowned, and the helmeted. Another family is the Dasyornithidae. These are called bristlebirds. There's only 3, and they're all endemic to Australia. These occur in dense shrubbery along the coast. This rufous bristlebird, they're in this dense shrubbery, and they're very secretive. We were told to watch very closely and hope we saw one. Fortunately, this bird didn't know the rules. He actually came out on the road in front of us and displayed for a couple of minutes. So, nice bird. Now, the pardalotes, there's only 4 of these, and they're all endemic to Australia. They're in wooded areas, nest in tree holes, very colorful little birds. They will eat some insects, but they also eat something called lerp, a lot of it, which is some plant juices that have gone through this insect larvae called a psyllid larvae, and then comes out the back as something they call lerp. It's supposed to be kind of a protective cover, and it's basically sugary. They also eat manna, which is some droplets of sap from trees that have been injured by insects. So they actually eat a fair amount of sugar also. But very cute little birds. This is the striated pardalote and the spotted pardalote. The Acanthizidae, this family ranges from Malaysia to New Zealand. Um, so it's not an endemic family, but they are small birds. They tend to be dull coloreds, and you can see the insectivorous bill. These thornbills tend to be in open forests. So we have a yellow rumped and a striated thornbill. And then these scrub wrens tend to be in dense shrubbery. And so we have a white-browed scrub wren and a spotted scrub wren. The pomatostomids are the pseudo-babblers. These are very gregarious birds found just in Australia and New Guinea. They tend to be they're loud, they're gregarious, and they tend to be in groups of like 3 to 12. And they cooperate in building nests and such, so a kind of cooperative breeding. So we have a chestnut crowned and a gray crowned. The Cyclosomatidae are quail thrushes and jewel babblers. Quail thrushes are in Australia. The others are in New Guinea. You can see it does kind of look like a cross between a quail and a thrush. And these do cooperatively breed, and they eat a variety of things. The next one, the Neocididae, when you see these, think of nuthatches. That's their kind of the way they live. They're about the same size. They go all over the major trunks and such looking for insects. And these actually have a lot of cooperative breeding. If you're into taxonomy, you might notice the family name Neocididae is similar to the nuthatch family name, which is Cididae. This one with the bellbirds, it's named after a sound that the male makes. With him, again, they're fairly omnivorous in woods and forests, and they're just found in Australia and New Guinea. This one, the shrike-tip family, there's only 3, and they're all in Australia. What I think is, just looking at him, I'm just amazed at the size of the head compared to the body, and then that big bill with the hook on it. They are very insectivorous, and that bill can be used to pry bark and also to break into insect galls. The Artemidae is not an endemic family. It actually ranges from South Australia through Australia and Tasmania, but some of these birds are kind of representative of the area. The wood swallow is not a swallow, but it does eat insects on the wing. The butcher birds, these are large birds, kind of like almost as big as a raven. You can see a big, strong bill with a hook on the end. They actually do go after live prey as big as doves. The Australian magpie, big bill again. These range all over the country. You'll definitely see them if you go to Australia. They have subspecies which differ in the amount of white, gray, and black on the back. They're very protective of the young in the breeding season, and they do say you have to watch out because they refer to it sometimes as swooping season because they can be very aggressive. And then there's currawongs, again, a big bird with a big bill, and these eat small vertebrates and insects. The Kohlhaas just has these 2 species, which have very different names, and they look very different, but their habits are very similar. They both build mud nests, and then beyond that, they're very gregarious. They're in groups. They eat small vertebrates, invertebrates, and seeds. They cooperatively breed. In fact, this cooperative breeding is different than the usual. It seems that everybody helps build a nest, everybody helps incubate, and that more than one female is actually laying eggs. So it's definitely a group effort. And the Petroicidae, these are the Australasian robins. They're not robins at all, but they reminded the early settlers of robins back home. So we have red-capped, flame robin, scarlet robin, western yellow robin, and hooded robin. And then the Astrilidae, these are called waxbills. definitely not an endemic family. They actually range as far as Africa, Asia to Australia, but there are quite a few species that live in Australia. Most of them would be endemic. Um, they are found in all different habitats. Most of ours we saw in the north. We had one in the desert. And basically, the way we saw most of these is by, we were in a dry area and near a water hole, and they would show up. So I'm just going to go through these. We have a diamond firetail, red-eared, a Gouldian finch, zebra finch, that was in the middle of the desert, double barred finch, crimson finch, and mass finch. Also a long-tailed finch and a star finch. All of these are pretty small birds. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed seeing these birds. Thank you for coming. And do you have any questions?